We've created a button that's sorting our data source in the background. When we click the button, it sorts it ascending and then descending. We don't see the changes in data reflected in our chart. Instead, we see this sort of layering on effect where we're basically recreating the chart with every button press. So now let's look at how to update changes in our chart. So we'll head to the code, and let's go to the plot function because that's the function that creates the binding between the data and the elements in the SVG. So what we want to do is we want to change the structure here so that we have 3 different phases. So just above the creation of the bar element, I'll create a comment. And we'll have a phase which is the enter phase, and that's where data is bound to elements. Then we'll have an update phase, and that's where the elements that are bound are updated with changes in data. Finally, we'll have an exit phase, and that's where any unbound elements are removed. So let's copy the code that creates the bar elements, and we'll paste it underneath this enter comment. And the only thing that we want to keep is the selection of all elements that have the bar class, binding them to params.data, and specifying that we're within the enter phase. And within that enter phase, we just want to append the rectangle elements and give them a class of bar. So after this line, we'll type a semicolon. New lines. Now let's type this.select all, and we'll again select all the elements that have the bar class. We'll take this block of remaining code and indent back 1 level, and we don't need to type .update like so. Instead, that is implicit, so I'll delete that. And as well, we don't need to type .data because it's already bound. So now we're in the update phase. I'll cut it and paste it just below this comment. So what we're doing now is in the update phase, we're updating all of these attributes. Finally, within the exit phase, we're going to write some code that denotes getting rid of any remaining elements that aren't bound. Now in this particular case, we have the same amount of elements and the same amount of pieces of data, so this won't actually fire. But in this case, if we updated the data so that it had fewer elements, it would remove those unbound elements. Okay, so underneath exit, create a new line and type this.selectAll, and we'll select all of the elements classed as bar. We'll type data, params data. So this is going through the data set that's bound, and we'll type .exit. And finally, .remove. So this will make sure we remove any elements that don't have corresponding bits of data. Let's do the same for the text. I'll get rid of the existing code that we had before that created the bars, copy the code that creates the bar labels, and in the enter phase just below the newly created bar code, I'll paste this, and we're going to select all classes of bar label, bind them to params.data, and on the enter phase, we want to create text elements that are classed bar label. Put a semicolon after that, new line, the remaining bits of code, we'll cut it. And now in the update phase, just underneath the updating of the bar classed elements, paste. And then we'll type this.select all. And we want to select all bar label elements. And let's indent that back. Now we're okay with what we have here because the update phase is implicit. So we don't need to state .update. And as well, we don't need to type .data because it's already bound. All right, then in the exit phase, underneath the newly created exit function for the bars, this.select all, and we'll select .bar label. So again, we're selecting all elements that are classed bar label. And this is the data source, .data params.data. Then on exit, we want to remove those unbound pieces of data. Let's delete what we have here before, which is the old bar label code. And then we still have the axes, but we'll take a look at that in a moment. Okay, so what we did was we rewrote our code within the plot function so that there was an enter phase. In the enter phase, we bind the data. We specify that we're in the enter phase. And then what do we want to append? Here, rectangles that are classed bar and text elements that are classed bar label. Then in the update phase, we select those elements that we created. So select all the bar elements, select all the bar label elements, and then apply these attributes. Finally, in the exit phase, we select the bar and bar label elements, and then we denote the data source to look at in order to, on exit, remove any unbound pieces of data. Save it, head to the code and refresh. Now when we click, the colors changed and they changed again. But something's happening, they're not moving. The reason why these bars aren't changing is because we haven't affected the X and Y scale domains. So let's go back into the plot function, and at the beginning, we need to set the new domain for the X and Y scale. So create some new lines, x.domain. What we'll do here is we'll go back to the original declaration and we'll copy the domain function. Now, let's paste it and put a semicolon. And we'll do the same for y.domain. Head back up to the top, and we will copy the domain portion of the statement and paste it. So every time you update data, you have to update your domains for your scales. Okay, save it, go back to the chart, refresh. Now when we click the button, you can see that the data has properly been sorted. But it seems like we're still stacking up new values for the axes. Well, that's because we'll need to write special code that creates the axes only once and then updates the labels according to the sorted data. And we'll do that next.